Hi, I'm Derek Robinson, and I'm joined today by Dennis Zanetti and Regilo Souza to talk about Health Connect Cloud and some of the considerations for adopting this product for InterSystems. We're going to dive right in, and we'll start with you, Dennis, with the first question, and you'll both have a chance to give your thoughts. But one of the big questions that a lot of people have is really what are the main differences between Health Connect and Health Connect Cloud? As we know, Health Connect is a long-running on-prem product, but Health Connect Cloud has some differences. So what are the major differences that you see between these two products?
Well, to be honest, it's really the same product. It's Health Connect is the product. Health Connect Cloud really refers to Health Connect as deployed as a managed service in the cloud. And that brings a lot of differences between the two products. The main difference being the infrastructure. On premise, the customers have complete control over the hardware and can specify, custom configurations, specific topology. You can manage everything to your very specific needs. Where in the cloud, that's all managed for you, and it's handled by our cloud delivery team. So a lot of those things are, just taken care of and handled for you, like resources and security and disaster recovery, high availability. Those are all things that we take care of in the cloud.
Right. Nice. Hedgelo?
I think Dennis covered that pretty well. I think that the only thing that I would add is that we have monitoring, we have alerting, we have security standards that we need to follow, SOC 2, ISO 27001, several other certifications. I'm not going to name all of those here,
Yep.
but it's basically Health Connect implemented and deployed by InterSystems, by the cloud delivery team, with all the best practice that InterSystems consider that are important.
Right.
For both AWS and InterSystems.
Yeah. Right. That makes sense. So you did mention a few of the benefits there, Hedgelo. Let's talk a little bit more about some of these benefits of Health Connect Cloud and really specifically talk about what users are most impacted by those benefits. So what makes a customer particularly a good candidate to adopt Health Connect Cloud instead of, say, traditional on-prem Health Connect?
So the customers that don't want to be maintaining, doesn't want to operate, that doesn't want to be waking up in the middle of the night and the weekend, those are the customers that are interested in having the managed services because we are going to do that for them. So you don't need to be worried about updating operating system. They don't need to be worried about installing new libraries. They don't need to worry about be patching or doing any security because that's something that we take on a regular basis. We develop a lot of automation to make sure that these are applied to them. The customer that needs more control, that they want to have a really hands-on on everything, then I think that is the customer that would prefer being an on-premise environment than on a managed services environment.
Right.
Yeah, I agree totally. And I think that, the benefit of the cloud is really a reduced total cost of ownership. You'll need fewer resources. You'll need fewer, very specific resources. You'll still need to engage with your security and networking teams and folks like that, but they won't be hands-on, and they'll just be working with us to configure the cloud environment in a way that best supports your organization. Where on-premise, you're hands-on and you're managing it all yourself, and that allows you to set it up however you want.
I think I would add to that because I believe that most of the people think that it's just implementing Health Connect on the cloud, and it's not the case. It's all the services that enhance and complement Health Connect. So DNS, firewall, networking, snapshot backups, everything that you needed to have a production level, critical mission level environment is what we do on the managed services.
Right. Nice. That's great. So, lots of benefits there we run through. And when we think about having your solution managed by InterSystems in the cloud, of course, one of the questions that some users might have in addition to all those benefits is, what am I not getting, right? Are there features that are in Health Connect that maybe I'm not getting in Health Connect Cloud? Is there any functionality that users should know about that doesn't exist in Health Connect Cloud that they may be used to in Health Connect?
Not really, but I think things work a little bit differently in the cloud. As we mentioned, many of the configurations are managed for you and things that you wouldn't have to worry about. That's not necessarily a loss of functionality. It's just already taken care of you for you. The other big difference that you'll notice is that in the cloud, we have a cloud services portal that allows you to self-service and manage a lot of the administration and configuration settings, things like creating new users, setting up your network, creating firewall rules, and things like that just work differently in the cloud.
Right. Hedgelo, anything you'd add there?
I think that adding to the portal is getting the flexibility on where you are going to implement that. So it's not that you want to have one specific place. If you're in the US, you have 4 regions that you can implement that. The high availability is separated in multiple data centers around 6-mile difference from each other, which already meet most of the DR's requirements from our customers. So I don't think there is any restriction on the functionality, but there are different ways to implement that, and I think that it's basically a benefit.
Right. Nice, that makes sense. So one thing I've heard from customers now and then who are maybe a little bit uncertain about this move to the cloud is whether, kind of the uncertainty of knowing if they have the right knowledge or skills to implement these cloud technologies. So, a lot of this is managed for the customers. So I guess the question is, should customers feel they need to become expert in any of these cloud technologies to feel comfortable making a move to Health Connect Cloud?
No, not at all. As all the cloud features are managed for you, so you don't need to become an expert. That's part of really the value of a managed service. Our cloud delivery team are experts in the cloud and will help walk you through everything that you need to know. The couple of things that I can think of that might be important to understand are, understanding how cloud storage works. You'll be providing files and access to data through the cloud. So that's a little bit different. And also, I think you need to be familiar with managing your code through Git and code editor tools like VS Code. That's the way that we promote code and manage our code in the cloud. So I think that's a technology you should be able to understand.
Yeah, I agree. There is no need to understand anything regarding cloud specific, but as Dennis mentioned, is a remote service. So there are a few things that need to be different. You still needed to have a VPNs connected or other alternative for connectivities. And I think having source control and CI/CD pipeline as our standard through best practice is something that the customers need to be aware of.
Right. And we do have learning on many of those topics as well for some of those different ways that you interact with the product. So good to know a few of those. Let's consider looking a little bit at the integration side of things for really the interface engineer. What's the level of effort for someone with existing integrations in Health Connect to move those interfaces to Health Connect Cloud? Are there any workflows or kind of new things they'll need to learn? Of course, the source control workflow is one of those things, but kind of what's the effort level for existing interfaces to be moved to Health Connect Cloud?
So I think that is really straightforward. The only thing that the customer needs is export their production, or in a CI/CD pipeline, our source control, that already take care of moving all the code there. Of course, that is going to have some adjustments because your network is different from what is in the cloud, but just making these tiny adjustments, you would be already going live. It's not unusual that our customers go live in less than 30 days.
And as we mentioned, I think the Cloud Services Portal is a new workflow, but it's very easy to use. The other thing that I find amazing about the cloud is that new deployments can be created right from the portal, so you can get set up in a matter of minutes, and that makes it really easy to set up your new environment, configure it, and work on the migration and all the testing you need to do.
Right. Nice, that's great. That kind of serves as a good segue into the final question here, which I think both of you just touched on a little bit, a part of this answer. But for customers that are looking to migrate or even start new deployments in Health Connect Cloud, how long does this process typically take? And also, what resources are expected of the user, and how can they get help throughout that process? So I know, Regilo, you mentioned a lot of times less than 30 days you can get up and running. But as a whole, from timeline, resources that are expected of the user, and how they get help during that process. Anything you'd want to share about that for new users or migrating users?
The customers are not going to require much time to being up and running. If it's dedicated, probably in 2 to 3 hours, you could have an environment app completely configured, ready to accept their code and already transfer and process messages. Of course, there are more details on this. We needed to have some network administrator available to set it up, VPN connections. You are going to have environments now directed to this new server, but it's something that imagine if you were on your prem and you needed to get a new server up and running, would take more or less the same effort for moving interfaces from one IP to a different IP address.
Yeah, I think the bulk of the time is really mostly around testing and validation of your interfaces as you migrate them into the cloud. The cloud delivery team works directly with you to understand your requirements and help guide that implementation, that original configuration, and that's not a very burdensome effort at all. And then we also have a Right Start program that provides onboarding and implementation services to improve your time to value. And that part of that program, we will work directly with you to provide mentorship, help you build interfaces, understand best practices, and really get the most value that you can out of your cloud deployments.
Awesome. Well, it sounds like a lot to digest, but a lot of actionable paths forward for users. So, Dennis, Regilo, thanks so much for taking the time.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.